right, so uh, part 4 is, let's see, most looks like king and pawn endgames, some minor piece endgames, rook endgames. Well, actually, almost everything. Queen and king, queen versus king and pawn. So a lot of different endgames here. Hopefully, we have enough time to go through them.
But what's the name of the chapter?
Endgames for Class C,
Oh, okay.
1400 to
So it's
1600.
just kind of variety.
Yeah.
Sounds like it revisits some of the same themes, but maybe at a higher level or something. I'm not sure.
Well,
Because we've done queen and king.
well, it's queen versus king and pawn,
Oh, with the pawn.
so it is a little different.
Okay. All right.
So let's see what it says here. The need to know endgames becomes a much higher priority once you reach 1400 to 1600. In the US, this is the average tournament player. You've probably become serious about moving up to the ranks. To successfully do that, you'll need to expand your endgame arsenal and master a series of easy to learn but critically important positions and concepts. So this chapter is far larger than any other chapter in the book, he says, because it's a quantum leap in endgame understanding. Okay. So far we've mastered the opposition and basic king and pawn versus lone king. If you haven't mastered this material, stop and go back to part 3 and catch up. You could check out part 3 on our YouTube channel.
That's right. Is it up already?
Yeah.
Yeah, and also
Well, actually, it should be up in like an hour and a half. I scheduled it.
Okay. It's still on Twitch video on demand. Those are only kept around, I think, a couple of weeks if you're not a partner, but it should still be there, too.
All right, king and pawn versus lone king. A king and pawn versus lone king endgames are, for the most part, pretty simple affairs. In fact, a glance is usually enough to let you know who will win. Yada, yada, yada. Let's look at this position.
Yeah, I'm so thirsty. I wish I had time to get some tea before I came.
And you don't have your errand boy to go get it for you.
True.
All right, in this position, it's quite confusing white to play. If one follows our rule of opposition, like we learned in the last chapter, king f2 creates that rectangle with the dark squares, being in the corners of it, like how we learned last time. But the game will be drawn in this case. Right, king f2, king g7, I'm assuming, yes. Just making sure I don't want to mess it up, in here. And we'll see that the king won't get in front of the pawn.
Right, yeah.
And as we already realized, it's a draw. So, if this doesn't make any sense, run, don't walk, to part 3 and read the section that we talked about already. So white failed to win in that variation because he wasn't able to get his king in front of the pawn. So, opposition isn't going to help us win this, in this case. Useful advice. If taking the opposition fails to accomplish the goal of getting the king in front of its pawn, then it's useless to take the opposition in the first place. That is useful advice. So we're going to have to go around the back. King e2.
Yeah, that was actually what I was about to ask is, can you go around?
Yes. The king advances and moves away from the enemy. King g7, king d3, king f6, king c4, and king c5. We did it. We're in front of our pawn. And opposition. With a basic win for white, as we saw in part 3. Yes. Alright, so let's look at a slightly different position.
And this is useful. This is really useful for me.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's right in your rating. Black to move, it's a draw. As we've already seen this position, even though white has the opposition, the position's a draw, because we can still move straight back.
Right.
Dang it, I made it white's turn. I hate when that happens. Like that. We can move straight back when we need to. And so on. He gave king d6 stalemate, but you know how we do it. We've also learned that when the stronger side's king gets one square in front of its pawn, not counting a rook pawn, that the result of the game depends on who has opposition. So, for example, like this. If it's black to move, it's still a draw, because we'll go here into opposition. Therefore, black has opposition because it's white's turn.
Right.
And because black has opposition, it's a draw. You know, and we can do like we just saw.
Mm-hmm.
So if the strongest side's king gets one square in front of its pawn, the result of the game depends on who has opposition, like we illustrated in part 3. But this flounders if the pawn is a rook pawn, or if the pawn is on the 5th rank, and the king is on the 6th rank. For example, here. With black to move, we saw that when everything was down here, that this move drew to get opposition. But here we'll see that that doesn't work. If it's black to play, white still wins. Because he can't go backwards now.
Right, okay, yeah.
He has to step up, and then we win.
So the king would have to be on the fifth rank or less
Right.
for it to be a draw.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. If the king is on the 6th rank, it's a win no matter who has opposition, as long as it's in front of the pawn.
Right.
And
okay.
it's not a rook pawn.
Right. Okay.
Can't be a rook pawn.
Yeah, pawn on the 5th is always a win.
As long as the king is in front, yes. Absolutely. So, let's see. He says all this stuff again. So this can be confusing to many players. So, you know, make sure you understand the 3 examples we just looked at. Let's see. Rule. If the stronger side's king gets one square in front of the pawn, the result of the game depends on who has opposition unless one of the 2 exceptions are present. The game is always a draw if the pawn's a rook pawn. Or if it's a non-rook pawn and it's on the 5th rank, the king is on the 6th rank, taking the opposition won't save the defender, as we saw here. All right, let's look at another example. White to move. What do you think? White to play. Is it a win or a draw? Or does black win? Probably not.
Oh, let's see. If it's a draw or not. Let me see.
White to play.
All right.
See if the chat can figure it out. How's it going, Rufus Blunder? Yeah, not easy. Really.
Seems like
This is like the least amount of material that's possible, and it's still pretty tough.
yeah.
Chess is a tough game. Who would have thought? 100 bits from George Hornsby.
Yay! Thank you, George. Hey, how's it going?
Thought I missed this when I left yesterday.
Well, we didn't have to end up having time for it.
All right.
So we decided to do it
learned
today.
too much about the Petrov.
So you just missed a tiny little bit. But we just started. Let's see. There.
12 bits from trying not to learn. This is the most obnoxious way to donate.
Yay! It's fine.
I just counted all 12 instantly. So
I don't
knew it.
mind little singles. I don't know. It looks like I can get a win.
It is white to play GM, no chance ever.
But let's see. King F5.
All right, and then what would black play?
I guess King E8.
Okay.
Unless you're trying to shoulder me down, but I'm just gonna go around. So I don't know, king e5, king e8, and then king e6. And then what do I do? King d8.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you go d7, then they just have to move it on out. And then you just escort it in.
Yeah, that'll win. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, you're correct that this position's a win. And even Nikolai said it was a draw, but he's incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
White wins in this position, believe it or not.
Yeah. I thought it looked like a win, but I'm not always right.
King f5 is the winning move. Trying not to learn really likes king f4. But then I'll play king e8. And then I'll play king d7. So that's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
You got to play king f5. You can't let me play king d7. Then I'll probably draw.
Right.
So king f5 is the way to go. Now, like you gave this variation, that's an easy win.
Mm-hmm. I guess it could try to come back down king f7.
Yeah, that's the tougher
shoulder
try.
you out.
Exactly.
And I didn't look at that yet, but I saw that was something
Possible.
you could do. So if that happens, let's see. Well, since you're gonna have to go king e5, yeah.
Yeah, only logical move, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we go king e8, that's the same as what we just looked at.
Right.
So he'll try this. It's the only logical try, actually. But now what do we do with white? Yay, chess, boo, Perrier.
So maybe
Looks like the chat's got it.
let's see, maybe
Some of the chat.
maybe king f6.
Opposition, yes.
Mm-hmm. I was just trying to
Yes.
make sure that, yeah.
Yeah, this one's not, king e6 is not going to work.
Right, yeah.
Because then we'll get to this position again.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, king f6, opposition, that's the way to do it. Can't let me go here, so you have to go here. Then we'll go here. And then we already have seen this many times. So yeah, believe it or not, white wins here, even though it looks like the pawn is too far advanced and black's king is pretty close. But it's not enough. White does end up getting the win by force with the help of opposition.
Mm-hmm. And now GM No Chance Ever says run around the back.
That is not correct.
Sometimes running around the back, is helpful.
He means in this position, but
I
king
know.
f6 is the win.
Yeah.
Actually, this could possibly
Yeah,
win.
let's just look at it and see if you can do it that way too.
This could win. I guess I'll go here. Because if I go here, you just can still do this.
Right.
So I have to try that.
Mm-hmm.
No, yeah, this draws, though. This draws. If you go here, I go there. I've got diagonal opposition on you.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no, but I just go here. What am I talking about? Yeah, this
Oh, yeah,
wins.
because you're past
Yeah,
the
obviously that wins.
fifth.
So this could still win, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this could still win. Because this is the only try. And we still get to win. Just don't check like I was looking at in my head, because then obviously it's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you can just go here.
Yeah.
So yeah, white actually has a couple ways to win this position. It's pretty funny.
Mm-hmm. Good suggestion, GM No
Yeah.
Chance.
The black king cannot go to e7. That's true. That is how the pawn moves. Oh, Rufus Blunder loves our stream.
Yay.
Thanks for the 500 bits.
Yay. Thank you, Rufus Blunder. Yay, I love Rufus Blunder.
All right, let's look at a slightly different position. No, come on. I'm learning about it still.
We changed the settings in OBS, so let us know if anything looks weird today. we've been told it looks the same, so that's fine.
All right, so it's white to play here. This is an easy win. All white has to do is move the king in front of his own pawn.
Mm-hmm.
If you see like little kids playing a position like this, they'll like push the pawn. Terrible. Don't do that. Gotta run your king in front.
Mm-hmm.
King d8, opposition, right? Distant opposition.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get to make a waiting move. And we already know about how this position's a win, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. However, if it's black to move in this position, it's actually going to be a draw, according to Silman.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that seems right. Black to move is quite another matter. After some mutual finesse, the game turns out to be a draw. Here. Now white can be a little sneaky here by playing king d1.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting move, because if you just do the normal move, like moving it up, he'll
Yeah.
get the distant opposition, and you're not going to be able to get 2 squares in front of my pawn. You're going to only be able to go 1 square up, and then that's a draw, like
Mhm.
we've seen, because it's white to play.
Right. Okay.
So we can try king d1, a little tricky, right?
Mm-hmm.
King e6.
Hey, intelligent. Hey, Mr. Soman.
Opposite. I like how he says opposition doesn't matter. Then the next thing he says is black gets distant opposition.
Hey, Alt F4 Pro. All right, I'm caught up. At war with
Nice.
dusk. I like to say hey to everybody. Okay.
What if black plays king d7 instead of king e6? King e6 is better. Stop white from getting in front of the pawn.
Mm-hmm.
But king d7 should draw too, I think. Because either way here, black should again get distant opposition with king d6. Yes. Only move for a draw. Every other move loses. And either way, you can move your king up. We saw this is going to be a draw.
Mm-hmm.
Or here and there. So a nice example of distant opposition, something that you wanted to talk about, I remember before we were looking at
Yeah,
that.
definitely.
Why not king e5? You mean here, king e5. Then I'll go here, and now it's black's turn, so black's losing. White has opposition when it's black's turn here. So if you move over, I'll move up. And then I'll be able to win. We looked at this in part 2, maybe. Maybe it was part 3, I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll have to rewatch that on our YouTube channel if you missed it.
You could show us again real quick, I guess.
No. We got too much to look at. I can't do it.
Oh.
This is the biggest chapter in the whole book, he said.
Oh, is it? Okay, that's fine.
All right, sneaking into a winning king and pawn versus king position. Okay. So by now, you should know when a basic king and pawn versus king position is lost or drawn. This knowledge allows you to correctly gauge more complex situations when the prospect of a pawn exchange forces you to decide whether the resulting position is favorable to your cause. This is the most classic example. Right here. Yes. So whoever move it is in this position is losing, right? This kind of position can occur with any sets of pawns other than rook pawns. Like if they're e pawns or d pawns or whatever. It's known as trebuchet. There's not too much to learn here, since at a glance it's pretty clear. Whoever moves is in Zugzwang. You could even call it mutual Zugzwang. So let's say it's white to play and white moves the king. We'll take it.
Right.
White can't move the king, unfortunately, to g4. That's illegal. And the same is if black to play. Black can't move here to protect his pawn. That's against the rules. So whatever you do, I'll take it. Then I'll queen with this pawn. The trebuchet situation is a dead loss for whoever's turn it is.
I did not see a naked Magnus.
Unfortunate.
More on that in a moment. I think he's implying that he was on stream. So we'll talk about that in a moment. I do want to hear about that. Can't be true.
Could be.
Rufus Blunder says, is there a secret way to memorize all of these rules? I've surely heard 1,000 times about opposition and so on, but a real game I always do it wrong.
Well, you need some experience. You know, if you have this opposition situation several times in your career, then eventually you'll remember it. You know?
And I think you're hitting on a key point, which is just repetition of the same idea. So I know you heard it 1,000 times. Maybe you're like me and you need to hear it 1,001 time.
Right.
But I'm also going to go back over the streams, and I am going to do it, and try to move it on myself, move the pieces myself, because that should reinforce the ideas, I think. Yeah, I do want to hear about that in a minute, Intelligent.
All right, so now it's white to move. This is the kind of position that sends many players into a panic. Who's better? What's going on here? How did I get here? Let's see. The idea is something. Just have to figure it out. But we know about trebuchet, and you can imagine that's going to happen potentially at this point.
Wait, what's trebuchet again? What? Or tell me what that word means again.
It was when the kings were here, and
Oh, that was called trebuchet. Okay, I missed
Right.
that. Sorry. Okay.
yeah.
All right.
So, Black's king will be closer to the center pawns when he takes the pawn. So at least Black should be better there in that case. And in fact, it means that in this case, Black is probably winning. I think, right?
I would think
Yeah.
logically, just because of that.
So take it. Now you don't want to play king d4, because then king f5, Black loses.
Right.
So instead we'll play king d3. Yes. And this should win. You have to protect your pawn, but then I get to put you in trebuchet.
Yeah, I like that.
Got you. This example shows us that a firm grasp of the following rule can prove very useful indeed. In a near or upcoming trebuchet position, the side whose king can make the first diagonal contact with the enemy pawn can often force a winning trebuchet. That's what he means. Here it's a diagonal attack against the pawn.
Oh, okay.
If white got to do that first, then white would win, because black would have to defend, and then you get to knock back to trebuchet. So that's the way to do it. You got to make the first diagonal attack against the pawn.
All right, let me read this real quick. I got to read it. So he had no shirt and no pants on. He ended up losing the match.
I feel like I play better in the nude.
I mean, surely they didn't let him play like that, did they? All right,
Though trebuchet happens fairly often, far more common is the following situation. Like this.
Okay.
So can white win? Well, it doesn't matter whose turn it is, since the e5 pawn is dropping no matter what. If it's black to play, white's going to take the e-pawn next. If it's white to play, white plays king d6 and makes you lose your e-pawn.
Right, okay, yeah.
But let's just say it's black to play.
Does this have a name, this little position, or no?
No.
Okay.
So the idea here for black is that, even though you're going to lose the pawn, we can transpose to a drawn king and pawn endgame that we looked at in earlier parts. So what you do is you go king f7. So that when you take the pawn, I can get into opposition.
Get opposition, yeah.
You don't want to go here, and then white has the opposition and black loses, like we saw in previous parts of the book.
Right.
So that's the idea, and this happens way more often than like when the king's here, is this type of situation. Basically, your king can just be on any of these squares.
Yeah, so black could mess it up, I guess, if they went e7, king e7.
Yeah, I showed that
Yeah,
right here.
yeah. I'm just making
E7.
sure I understood.
So
Okay.
all you got to do is go around e7.
Okay.
And then once they take the pawn, then you go to e7 to get opposition.
All right.
You could be in any of these highlighted squares.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Man, this endgames are so complicated.
You can often solve seemingly difficult situations by steering the game towards the many basic situations you've already mastered. That's true. And remember, the ability to see whether or not you or your opponent can gain the opposition is key moments and is extremely important. Successful endgame play is impossible without this skill. Okay.
No, it's not a shame. People can make out he was just in his underwear. What a shame. I mean, it's kind of funny.
Right. I mean, it's not a big deal.
It provides
in my opinion.
some comedy and drama.
There's nothing shameful about the human body, you guys. Come on. Alright, so a king and doubled pawns against a lone king, which is this situation. A king and two doubled pawns versus a lone king is always a win unless the pawn can't be properly defended, or unless they're rook pawns, as usual. The defender's only hope lies in winning one of the two pawns, or tricking the opponent into some lucky stalemates. And, usually when you're up two pawns, you're winning.
Mm-hmm.
So just be careful to avoid stalemates. If the pawns are healthy and not rook pawns, king and two pawns is always a win. But these are not healthy pawns, they're doubled. So, if it's black to move, black actually draws here. With the obvious move.
Yeah.
Where you can't defend your pawn.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's not really two pawns up, because you lose a pawn.
Right.
Immediately. And then we'll go to that position that we've already seen before with king and pawn against king.
Mm-hmm.
Now with white to move, it wins. Obviously we got to stop this, so we'll go here. Now this would obviously be a draw if it weren't for this extra pawn we have. So the way you win this is you get him all the way down there, and then you just move the pawn at the very end.
Mm-hmm.
To zugzwang him. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
So for example, he gives the line here. I'm sure it's these moves. Not really looking, but now instead of stalemating or losing the pawn, we'll just make a pawn move. He has to go here, and then we win. So winning with double pawns is just this easy.
Okay.
You keep the backwards pawn back. We keep him back here until we don't stalemate him.
Right.
Push him, waste that tempo. And that's the easiest way to win. So that seems simple enough, but why not push both the g-pawns? Well, you could get some stalemating chances. And sometimes you're already sort of stuck in that situation. Like, let's say, for example, it's this position. Like this with white to move. See, now things are a little trickier. Because the pawns are further advanced. Right?
Mm-hmm. A couple of questions it looks like. Let's see.
Why not G4 instead of G3? Yeah, well, big difference.
Oh, he already answered it. He says, oh, well,
Yeah.
anything works. Oh, no, I didn't think you were shaming the body. I think,
Right.
I knew what you meant. It was a shame. It is a shame for Magnus. He's probably embarrassed. So I agree with you. But it's not a shame for everybody else because it's funny.
So here it's a little tougher, like I was saying, because the back pawn, the back doubled pawn is a little higher up. So there are some stalemating tricks here. So white can still win this, though, but he has to be careful. Little check. And he'll play that. No, we won't stalemate him now. We'll have to go here. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the problem. After king h7, we're not going to go here and stalemate. Because this pawn's too far up, controlling h6.
Mm-hmm.
We have to give it up.
Oh.
Rook. could make a queen.
Yeah.
Or if anything wins. But we'll make him take it, and now we get this winning position that we've seen before already. Well, actually, maybe we haven't seen this exact position before, but
Yeah, same idea.
yeah, and wins.
Okay, yeah, that one is tricky.
So when you possess a king and 2 doubled pawns versus a lone king, don't push both pawns up the board together, since that increases the weaker side's chances for a lucky stalemate.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thanks, Rufus Blunder.
Yeah, he is good at explaining.
Well, also, I'm reading from a book, so.
I know, but you're good, you know.
Also, I'm getting rid of some of the stupid stuff he says.
Which is great.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Otherwise, we'd be here all day.
He likes to philosophize a bit in there, it seems like.
That's true.
And we don't necessarily need all of it.
And he gets paid by the page, I guess. No, I don't think that's true.
Intelligence says, Spencer, do you already know this theory? He learned one new thing last time we did Silman, but a lot of
Right,
this
that
he knows.
opposition thing from when they're not lined up.
The same color squares.
Right.
But
yeah, I know almost all this
other
stuff.
than that, he seems to know everything. Books are really smart. That's true.
So, in general, a king and a pawn versus a lone king positions, when the weaker side loses, it's because he can't get his king in front of the enemy pawn. If you can't block and stop the pawn from queening, you're a goner. Rook pawns allow all sorts of exceptions due to the fact that there isn't a file on the other side. But here, of course, it's winning for white.
Mm-hmm.
The black king, if it was on the H file, would be able to draw the position. Oops.
Mm-hmm.
Just trying to get rid of these. Does this work? Yeah, that's the legal position. If the black king was on the H file, then obviously we already saw that would be a draw.
Mm-hmm.
But here, black can just resign, no matter whose turn it is.
Yeah. Hey, some Toilet Break wants to know, is it possible to memorize the table base?
Obviously not. No.
And I have not seen the movie. I can't remember who asked about it. Maybe Two Bishops of what else. But I have not seen that.
All right, but now in this position, if it's black to move, a little bit different, because the white king is on the H file. It's actually going to be a draw. If it was white's turn, white would just play, like we saw, king g7 wins. Game over. But it's black to play. And black can actually force the king to be sort of stuck here on the H file.
Mm-hmm.
Like this.
In front of the pawn, yeah.
Yes. Now, if you go king up, we can even just go take the pawn. If you go king back, we can go and get in front, like we've seen prior to this lesson. So, we'll try to push the pawn. And then king f8. Now, in this situation, king f6 would even draw, actually, as it turns out. Because normally you try to win like this, but you're not in time. We'll just go eat the pawn. But okay, king f8 is sort of safer, as you might imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, king g6, king g8 is going to draw, or king h6 is going to draw. So you could try this move, or h6, it's the same. And then if h7, it's going to be stalemate. So you could try like this, but it's not going to help.
Mm-hmm.
This is a rare example of this side with no pieces left stalemating the other king.
Right.
That's true. In fact, we can go a little deeper here into this concept. We can add more pawns. See what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, adding a third pawn, it's still a draw with black to play here. The same way. The tempo doesn't matter. As long as the king is stuck there. Because we can always just play king f8 to f7.
Yeah.
And your king can't escape. like how he plays this out. Stalemate.
Mm-hmm. It's good to play it out for lower rated, you know. What are people saying?
Anything fun?
Let's see. Intelligence says he had in chess.com, a position with a rook and the opponent had only one bishop. So basically, I read the theory that you need to push the king to the opposite color corner of his bishop, but it's very complicated to do that. Can you please cover that sometime, Spencer? That's probably in here.
So you had a rook and he had just a bishop and there's no pawns? Yeah, king f8 should draw on the first move as well, intelligent. Well, rook against bishop's a draw. That's not even necessarily a very difficult draw. Rook and bishop against rook is a tougher draw. Which I think that's probably... Maybe both of those things are covered in this book.
Mm-hmm.
I would guess. So here's a diagram he has.
Wait, who did you play Trying Not to Learn? With somebody from the chess club? Or maybe you can't say. You said that you played his first over-the-board game. I thought you lived in the Virginia area. Do you live in this area? Did I get confused?
If it's a rook pawn and the defender's king is anywhere in these red squares that I highlighted, it's going to be a draw for the defender, is what he's saying. No matter where the, where the stronger king is.
Oh, your school chess club. Okay, cool. Don't get the COVID, though.
All right, now we can talk about entering the square of the pawn. The square beyond compare.
Yeah, I like to talk about the squares.
When an enemy pawn is trying to outrace your king down the board, it's always nice to be able to see with a glance if you or your opponent can draw. Sadly, most players feel like they must do the old he goes here and I go there routine for an endless series of moves to see if their king can make it back in time to stop an unescorted king. Fortunately, there is an easier way. In this position, in which white's king is too far from the action, this poses a simple question. Can black's king stop or even win the enemy pawn? The game hangs in the balance. If the black king can stop the pawn, then the game's a draw. Otherwise, it loses. The answer lies in the technique called the square of the pawn. So we can draw a diagonal extension from the pawn to the end of the board. Like that. And make a square out of it. You guys know about squares.
Mm-hmm.
If the king can step into the square, he's going to be able to catch the pawn. Rule: if the black king can step into the square, it will stop the pawn. If it can't, the pawn will run for a touchdown. Some sort of sports reference, I guess. Now you can see at a glance without calculating if it's going to catch the pawn or not. King move will, if it's black's turn, king can just go right in there.
Okay.
Now if it's white to play, then the square is going to be different. Because we'll go here. It's white's turn. White move. Now this is the square where the black king cannot enter because it can't move two squares.
Right.
So it's important to understand, like, if it's white's turn here, you can't say, oh, my king could step into the square. Well, it's white's turn, so white gets to move. Then you decide whether you can move into the square or not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, so you can't go there.
That makes sense.
So you're going to lose then. Let's see. Outside pass pawns. In part 3, we learned that many pawn endgames could be won by the fox and the chicken coop technique. I didn't mention it then, but this is really just one example of the influences of an outside pass pawn. So what is an outside pass pawn, you might ask? That is a great question, although I think it's a little self-explanatory, but still a good question.
Mm-hmm.
Set up this position. White wins here. It's a pass pawn that stands to the side of the main sphere of battle. Such a pawn is usually a very valuable commodity, since it can force the enemy king to run far away. What's funny? Some funny stuff?
The way he writes, the sphere of battle.
Yeah, that is kind of a weird way to say it. So here, for example, saying it's white to play, this would be the sphere of battle.
Right.
And so this is our outside pass pawn.
Mm-hmm.
Even though in a technical sense, this is a center pawn, so these should be considered outside pawns, but there are more pawns here. So the king is going to have to stop this pawn, while our king can go fox in the chicken coop kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So white easily wins this position. It doesn't even matter whose turn it is, thanks to the d pawn, the outside pass pawn. He could try king f7. If black goes king d7, it's pretty obvious that king f6 is going to win.
Mm-hmm. No, just go eat.
Right, so king f7 is at least a better try here. King d5 is what he suggests. He says d7 also wins. This is what I would do, because then you could just force the king away and then go in this way. Also king d5 wins. That's actually his main line. If king e8, then king e6, we've already seen that idea. So king f8. And then, haha, opposition. So if these pawns were all gone, it would be a draw. But they're not. We can just go take them. That was easy.
Mm-hmm.
White started out with an extra pawn, so the result is hardly surprising. Can white use the outside pass pawn in the same manner if material is even? Often, the answer is yes. Let's take a look at this one.
I didn't look at the whisper yet, Intelligent, because when I finished streaming yesterday, I was on Ben's stream, and today's been crazy, but I am going to look at it. I'm interested in that link. Good point, trying not to learn. I was cautioning him about over-the-board play, and he...
Talking about how you go to karaoke?
Yeah.
You don't go there very frequently.
I don't.
And you're not, like, sitting across from somebody the whole time.
No, Ben...
Like you're at a chessboard.
Yeah, Ben made us sit at a table last time, away from the bar. I like to sit at the
That's
bar
smart,
usually.
although I sat at the bar.
You did sit at the bar.
Yeah, but I like the bar.
It was more safe at the table. All right.
He said he was JK.
Oh, I know you're JK.
Oh, Alt F4 Pro subscribed. Thanks, Alt F4 Pro.
Yay! Thank you, Alt F4 Pro.
So this position's a win. It's white to play. This position's a win for two reasons. One, he has an outside pass pawn. Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And two, black's kingside majority is devalued since he's frozen. It's like a Disney movie in here. Yeah. So he can't make a passed pawn without losing a pawn.
Mm-hmm.
For example, check. King e6 would be a good defense. Trying with king c6 is not going to get it done. King c4 also wins.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, we're not in time to defend it. And I'm going to lose. So we could try king e6. Now we're actually going to need to use a little bit of finesse in this position.
Mm-hmm.
In order to win, white has to play the move king c4. Exclam. Okay, this isn't going to work this time, jettisoning the pawn. Because we catch it. And then maybe even black wins.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not. Well, whatever. White doesn't win, so it doesn't matter. Right? We can't jettison the pawn like we like to do. So, what about king e4, though? That seems like that could win, right?
I've lost track of what's different between this position and the last one. The pawn...
Black is not down a pawn. In the other position, it was both sides had pawns here and there. So it was just an extra pawn for white. This pawn was here. And white had an extra pawn here.
Oh, okay, yeah.
This one, it's equal pawns. It's 2 pawns each.
Okay.
So it's a little tougher to win. So is king e4 just as good? The answer is no, since black can create a passed pawn himself with f5 check. en passant and takes. Black's king can now step into the square of the pawn. If you go here, when we did the square, we can go get in the square.
Right.
And the white king can help, but the white king can't help and stop the pawn at the same time.
Yeah.
So, for example, white could try king d5 to try to help there, but we can just go boom shakalaka. Don't try to push it, then you'll actually lose this in a standard way.
Right.
We both queen, but because of opposition, I get to check you and then win your queen. A classic way to win this kind of endgame. So you got to be careful here. King e7 is the way to go. Oh yeah, he gave this whole variation that I gave. Yeah, king e7. So king c6. This allows white to wrest control over the queening square on c8. You know, obviously c6 is not going to get it done. You're not going to win that. You know, if you push your pawn, I'm pushing my pawn. So you're gonna, if you want to try to win, this is the way to go to try to win at least. Let's see, g5. That's queen. Black's king can't help anymore anyway. So now we'll both get to queen, but here you're not going to check and win my queen. You're not going to like check and then check and take my queen. That's obviously none of that's happening.
Right.
So this is a draw as long as you don't on purpose walk into a skewer. Like don't walk your king down here and get skewered. So it's clear that if we go back here, king e4 didn't win because f5 was the answer to get it done. So king c4 exclam. Very tough, actually. Black to move. White still wins here. f5. The only logical try. Get a passed pawn, right? En passant. King takes. So the king has to take. This is kind of a problem. Because if you go here, your king can't stop both of my pawns.
Right, yeah.
So you're going to have to try to take. King b5 exclam. White's pawn is further advanced than black's, so he can afford to take time to use his king to fight for the c8 square. If you push your pawn, he's in the square. So that's not going to work. You have to try to control c8 with king b5 exclam. King e7. It's clear that g4 fails because we queen first and it's our move.
Yeah.
So we can go here, or queen g4 or something. So king e7. Again, we gotta fight for the control of the square. Don't let him get there. But yeah, there's nothing to do. If you push, I queen. You push, I get behind it. Or if you go here, I go there. And then I queen and win. With an extra tempo even. So an outside passed pawn is a valuable endgame commodity. It can pose a serious promotion threat, and or it can force the defending king over to deal with it, leaving the embattled area, where most of the pawns reside, bereft of a defender. I knew you'd like that.
Bereft.
Yes.
I do like that.
So that concludes this portion of this chapter, the part with just king and pawn endgames. This might be a good place to stop if you wanted to.
Possibly. We had a question here. Trying not to learn says, wait.
What about king d8 instead of g3? That's illegal. Oh, here, king, what? What about king d8? He could never play king d8 when I played g3. Like, I played g3 here, he can't play king d8. I played g3 here. Unless you mean it's some other way earlier variation, which is possible, because I haven't been looking at the chat. Let me look at where else. Here? No, you can't play king... Here I played g3, but you can't... Here? Oh, here. Here you could play king d8, but that makes no sense. And that's it. That's every time I've played g3. Yeah. I mean, king d8. This is the only time, I guess, that you even legal to play king d8 instead of g3.
Yeah.
When I played it,
Okay.
it makes absolutely no sense. So I don't know if you meant like a different move, like, you know, instead of g4 or something.
Hey, now
It's
what were you
possible.
saying about the stopping point? Let me see the time. It's 4:35.
The white king was on b6 and the pawn was on c6. Like here? So instead of g4, you mean? Instead of, you said g3, but you meant instead of g4. If king d8 will play king b7. Frankly, obviously. Can't let you play king c8. And then here, check, and then I'll queen, and then I'll go there. f5 better than f6 because it forces the capture. Well, George, they both lose, so one move can't be better than the other, right? You know, here. I assume you mean, but f6 I would take anyway if I saw that f5 wins after taking. You know, either way, white wins, so I don't think it matters. But I guess I would try f5 just because I want to queen as quickly as possible. But I don't think it matters at all. Either way. You got it trying not to learn. No, but I understand because you were thinking like I would check and then you'd block. So you got to, I got to calculate all the legal moves. That is one way to get good at king and pawn endgames, just calculate all the legal moves. That's one way to do it. Because, you know, there's only like 4 or 5 legal moves sometimes.
That's true. I mean, I think we could keep going because I can, theoretically, we could stream even till 5:15.
All right, yeah, maybe we can just finish up the this section of this part with minor piece endgames.
Yeah, and then does that take us to the end of the chapter? Or
No.
He did
We
say
got
it was
rook
so long.
endgames, we got queen endgames.
Oh, okay. Maybe
we got
just-
plenty of stuff.
Yeah, maybe let's just do another section and see what time it is. Yeah.
Thanks, intelligent. Very few people study minor piece endgames. Anyways. Okay, bishop and wrong-colored rook pawn versus lone king. One of the most surprising and common miracle saves, it features a position where white enjoys a bishop and a pawn against a lone king. Sounds like it should be resignable, but it can be salvaged if the pawn is a rook pawn, and if the pawn queening square is different than the bishop, and if the defender's king can reach the queening square, or any square touching the queening square. So you have to have those 3 scenarios, in which case we can draw it. Yeah, so for example, here he gives an example that's different than that first. Like this. So it's not a rook pawn. And here. So take a look at this position. One would think that an extra bishop and pawn should be child's play. And here they'd be right. White wins because one of the 3 rules that we mentioned is not in effect. This is not a rook pawn.
No, can you say, I'm sorry, can you say the 3 again? I was spacing out for a second.
Okay. The
I'm
pawn
sorry.
is no problem. The pawn is a rook pawn.
Okay.
The pawn's queening square is different than the color of the bishop.
Okay.
And the defender's king can get into the queening square or a square touching the queening square.
Okay.
So here it's an easy win. All you have to do is, instead of stalemate, make a random bishop move. Although it's nice not to allow them, not to control this square, because then you might stalemate them by accident. So any bishop move like here will get it done. You know, bishop e5 is what he gives. And then here, etc. Can make a rook too. Was that some mail that we got?
Maybe.
Sounded like mail. It never fails.
Probably is the mail.
However, if we move it all on over, like this, the bishop and the rook pawn that queen's in the same color is going to be a win. So this is a dark square, right? So we have a rook pawn, and the king is in position, the black king, but it's the correct rook pawn for white. So this is going to be a win, no matter whose turn it is. You know, white can check, etc. And even if it's black's turn, it's going to win. So we need the scenario for it to be a draw. We need the bishop to be on the other color. Let's say it's like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can look in that when we're done with the lesson. Intelligent, we'll look at that link and get Spencer's opinion.
So here, all the three stipulations apply. It's a rook pawn. The bishop is the opposite color of the queening square.
Mm-hmm.
And the black king is in front.
Oh, yeah.
So this is a draw. What's going on there?
What the hell happened? I think that...
Oh, you got an alert. You got like a reminder.
I think
I got
the
you.
email...
Email reminder.
It's like an old email that's stuck somehow in the mail server on this Mac that I don't really use.
I got you.
Try to get it out. It does that occasionally. Hey, look, we lost our chat.
Oh, right, because the email got us. There we go.
There we go.
Welcome to the chat room. All right, so this position is going to be a draw. Stalemating isn't really helpful, so we can try to make a move. We can't even make progress, right? Something like this. Now we can't, if it was a blitz game, I might accidentally, try to check them. But that's not going to work. So if we don't want to stalemate, we have to move the king away.
Yeah.
But now all black has to do is move back and forth. And if you ever take away the g5 square, it's stalemate. And you can't kick them away from the dark squares.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a draw. Rule: bishop and rook pawn, that queen's on the opposite color of the bishop, versus a lone enemy king is a draw. Clearly, once you've achieved this endgame, it's a no-brainer to draw. That means that the only hard part is creating it if you're in trouble, or avoiding it if you're winning. The rest plays itself. Here's an illustration of both of these possibilities as an example. There. Put this guy here. Get some pawns. Here. And there. Alright, so white to move. So white's up 2 pawns, that's pretty good. But already, like when you're in an endgame, a strong player will notice the situation that we have already mentioned as a possibility in the future. This is the wrong color bishop.
Right.
And there is a rook pawn on the board.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have to use your brain to win this, or try to win it. So you don't want to play a move like g4, because they'll just take it.
That's your good pawn.
And then it's a draw.
Right.
As we've already seen. So that's what you can avoid. There's a lot of ways to try to play this position. He goes for king e5. And king f6. King f6 is an important square, actually. Bishop d7. And bishop f5. Now trading bishops won't make any sense. But now we rolled on with our g-pawn because we stopped him from sacrificing. King g8. You can try the move bishop h5, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hoping to take it. And then it's a draw, actually.
Yeah.
As you might imagine. But we would just play g5, of course. So that wouldn't change much, assuming white's paying attention. If it was like my dad's stream, he'd play bishop h5. Oh, I hung my bishop. King g8. Again, don't play g6 and I'll take it.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes here. h5. I'm okay if you take that. That's fine. That's a rook pawn, so I'll be left with the g pawn. Great.
Right.
I don't worry about that. Now if you go here, I force a queen.
Mm-hmm.
So you gotta go like that. And black can resign now. I'm going to play g7. I'm going to play g8. You can't stop me at this point. So as you can see, it's imperative that you know of this trick so you can avoid it, and keep that in mind when you're winning, so you don't let them sneak out of it. And if you're defending, you should know it too, of course, so you can trick your opponent if they happen to slip and let you take that G pawn in this case.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so a lone king versus a knight and a rook pawn. Okay, it's almost always going to be a win, right? Oh, but the pawn is on the 6th or 7th rank. Okay, so that's a little of a stipulation. A lone king versus a knight and a rook pawn on the 6th or 7th rank. So we've just seen an important instance where a bishop and a pawn can't beat a lone king, but surely a knight is flexible enough to be immune from such anomalies. One would think that a knight and a safe pawn would always beat a lone king, but there's one important exception. Rule: a knight and a safe pawn versus a lone king is always a win for the material advantage, except when the extra pawn is a rook pawn, and that rook pawn is on the 7th rank. Then you could draw it. We've seen that rook pawns often create exceptions to otherwise ironclad rules, and this is yet another case of the rook pawn curse. Let's set up the example here.
Mm-hmm.
Knight will be here. Pawn on the 6th rank. King. And king. Okay. We can make it black to move even. So, this example shows why the knight and pawn will win under normal circumstances, as long as the rook pawn is not on the 7th rank, which is not here.
Mm-hmm.
Black is doomed, even though it's his turn. Even though white's king is really far away, black has no chance to save the position, because it's a knight. Knight g4, exclam. It's smart to make it so the knight is behind the pawn. In this way, the black king can never go take it, because then our pawn will queen.
Mm.
If you play knight f7, and I go here, you've actually messed it up.
Oh, yeah.
I can take your knight, and once you push the pawn, I can go save it. If you move the knight, obviously I'll take this. So you gotta play with knight g4. So then if I go take your knight, you queen.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Word up. Useful advice. When you have to guard your pawn with your knight in this kind of endgame, it's usually correct to defend the pawn from behind. Like I just explained. Now we can just take our sweet time with our king, right? King g5 will lead to a new queen, so you can't really do that. And yeah, remember, when this was a bishop, it was a draw, but we've got a knight, so we're not going to draw this. Don't play knight f6 stalemate. Yes. And here, you also have to be careful. Don't check king h8, then you can't win. You'll stalemate or lose your pawn at that point. So you're going to have to get the knight into the game first. Knight e5. So when white wins these types of positions by taking control of this queening square with the knight. Easy. Took control of that queening square, so now you know it's you know what it is.
Okay.
It seems that the knight's ability to control any colored square, unlike the bishop, assures that the knight and pawn victory over a lone king in all normal situations. However, as stated earlier, there's one trick situation that must be avoided, or played for if you're the side who's losing. Like this. Here we go. Now it's black to move. This position is actually a draw. The h-pawn is too far advanced. That's the problem. That's the difference with what we looked at earlier. Yes. So here we have a miracle save that was promised in the section's introduction. Black's king controls the queening square, and the rook pawn is on the 7th rank. Incredibly, white has no way of making the annoying black king leave h8 or g7, sort of like how we saw when it was the bishop.
Mm-hmm.
King f6 is going to be stalemate. So it goes like this. But there's just nothing to do. We can have our stalemate with king g6.
That's interesting that when the pawn is further down the board, that's actually not good with this material.
Well, it was similar actually with king and pawn against king.
Mm-hmm.
You want the pawn to not be so far advanced so that our
Yeah.
king can get in front of
That's
our
true.
pawn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you got to have everything ready, otherwise you're overextended. And white can't approach the pawn with king g6 or h6, so there's nothing that white could even try to do here to win the position. You can't protect your pawn with the king, so you can't move your knight, so you can't you can't control the queening square, and so you can't win. You can't promote to a queen.
Mm-hmm.
Dang. All right, now let's talk about bishops of opposite color. Tournament players love to bandy about the term bishops of opposite colors. Though they often don't really know they don't know much about this interplay of minor pieces. In the middle game, bishops of opposite colors is thought to be an advantage for the attacker. That's true, since the other bishop can't defend the other one that's attacking. But in the endgame, bishops of opposite color can give the defender serious drawing chances in a position that you might think is losing. Even a one-pawn advantage is often inadequate to score the winning point. I mean, even 2 pawns or sometimes 3 pawns won't win. Let's look at an example. There we go. So even though black's king is on vacation, white has no chances of winning this position, since black will always snap off the pawn at f6. And there's nothing that white could possibly do to stop that. There's just no way.
Mm-hmm.
Easy draw. No analysis necessary. You just won't be able to push the pawn without me taking it. Let's look at it like this. A little bit more complicated position. Move our king a little closer. Give black a couple pawns. And this position is also a pretty easy draw. Make it white to play. White enjoys a dominant king position and an extra pawn. Nevertheless, black draws in a mindless fashion by moving his bishop back and forth along the a1-h8 diagonal, trading pawns whenever the opportunity presents itself, and finally sacrificing the bishop for the last pawn. Here's a sample variation of how the game could proceed. There. Swap off the pawns. Whenever you're worse in an endgame, you like to trade the pawns.
Okay.
So obviously if you push here, I'll just take and then give up my bishop for the last pawn. So you could try like this. This is actually a little bit tricky. Just a little bit though. Right? So his point is that if you take, he'll try to make this passed pawn.
Right, yeah.
So I would just play bishop takes. That's gonna draw.
Yeah.
Definitely. But even in this position, G takes does end up drawing, I think, right? Yeah. Because all you have to do is play f5 and your bishop controls this square,
Oh, yeah.
etc., mainly, etc. There are also a lot of cases where you just can't do anything at all. For example, here's one. Yeah, I like to play bishop f6 in that position. Just to show your opponent who's boss. Yeah, when the bishops or the pawns are on the same color as your bishops, it's very difficult to win opposite color bishops position. Already here, the players can agree to a draw. You know, there's no way to break through on the opposite color of your bishop. This position shows one of the many problems the stronger side faces with the bishops of opposite colors exist. The passed pawn on e6 is firmly blockaded. You can't break through on g5 or f6 or anything. And you can't take any of the pawns. Black draws by just keeping his king on e7 and moving the bishop back and forth. And taking on g5 if you have to. Useful advice: when you're in trouble An excellent last stand strategy is to trade into a bishops of opposite color position, like this. So if you had an endgame prior to this that was like with rooks and such, you'd like to trade the rooks into this position, of course. Because if both sides had a rook on the board, you could still try to win with an extra pawn. And often, if you have like a rook and a bishop against a rook and a bishop and it's opposite color bishops, you could even try to like sack the exchange to win that kind of position sometimes. So if you're trying to defend this type of position, even if you're a pawn down, going into an opposite color bishop's endgame is the way to do it, as you might imagine. We will continue our look at opposite color bishops in part 5. So this was just a little taste, just a little sample.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, probably is a good stopping point then. So that'd be more with opposite color bishops?
That's what he says.
Okay, yeah, that'd be
I can't
good.
guarantee that. I didn't write the book.
Yeah, and maybe you could just review. You don't have to show us all the positions again, like to kind of get us back into it the next time we do the
Certainly.
silman.
Through
Okay,
already.
cool.